Okay, welcome everyone. Today is April 1st, 2020, and I'm Terry Hildebrandt, the Director of Evidence-Based Coaching at the Fielding Graduate University. And today we have Dr. Brian Underhill. He's the founder and CEO of CoachSource, one of the largest networks of executive coaching groups in the world. And he's going to be talking today about executive coaching trends. So thank you for joining us today, Brian. And if you wouldn't mind saying just a little bit about yourself, and then you can start in on your presentation. And if any of you have questions or would like to add to the chat room, feel free to do that. The chat is available, and we will be answering questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Great to be here. Happy April Fool's Day. We're excited to be here and talking about coaching trends. As Terry mentioned, I'm the CEO of CoachSource. We're one of the largest coaching providers out there. I started in the field in 1997 when I first started to work for Marshall Goldsmith, who wasn't quite so famous then. I started coaching, managing coaching assignments, and meeting coaches along the way. And eventually we spun off into CoachSource in the mid-2000s. Still good friends with Marshall, but a separate firm. And we manage many large coaching engagements for clients, anywhere from one assignment to hundreds per year. Along with that, I like to stay in the know of what's happening in coaching, conduct research in coaching, write in the field, and attend conferences, which is where I'll go next to talk about a lot of the great activities happening in the field of coaching up until just a few weeks ago. In February, there was a very large coaching conference in India.
So Brian, just a quick update. So what we're seeing on the screen is not your slideshow, but both screens. So you might want to move into a different slideshow mode.
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah, I know I can do this over here. Swap displays.
Yep, that's great. Perfect. Thank you.
Yay. Okay. So I was showing you a conference in India that was really well attended. Another one in Sydney that I went on to, really well attended. The conference board in New York City, with a lot of corporations go. I highly recommend that one for coaches to attend, though it's not cheap, with a big dinner we had along with it. And then that was this one you're seeing. These pictures were taken less than a month ago, March 5th, something like that. Here we are, 1st of April, and wow, has the world changed ever since then, so quickly. Just baffling, I think, for many of us as we're getting used to a new reality for at least several months and possibly a full altered reality up into the future. What got me thinking that I'm in a profession and I'm with colleagues here who can handle this. You all, myself, all of us, this is what we do for a living, is help leaders deal with change, help them have a safe place to talk, to raise awareness, to help them see things from different perspectives, even something as practical as how to work from home, which many of us do all day long. Coaches are a profession that is well suited to help leaders, help society, honestly, deal with what we're dealing with right now. And I'm seeing some amazing efforts by coaches already, groups of coaches who are getting together to learn, to share, to offer free services. I'm aware of multiple initiatives where coaches are offering free services to teachers, to first responders, to nurses, doctors, and so forth. Just incredible to see what our profession can do to help the world during these crazy times. I'm going to take us now into the research of what I wanted to share with you today. The research was conducted in 2018, so we're going to back up just a bit in time, and has a nice big past history of previous versions of the research. And the research, by the way, is free on our website. You can download the entire thing. There's a section we call Thought Leadership on our website, and you can go help yourself to the PDF, because I'm only going to scratch a tiny surface of what we covered. And we did surveys. Almost 1,000 raters were surveyed for our research, about 100 organizations, people who manage coaching, about 117 internal coaches. Some of you may fall into that category. External coaches, they're always willing to fill out our surveys and grateful. So many of you are probably with us here today. And even executives who experienced coaching, we convinced them to complete our survey. I think it was the Amazon gift cards, honestly, but they filled out about 100 of them surveys to help us learn more about their perspectives of our industry. And an industry which has been predicted to grow. And through the research, we asked organizations, what is your prediction of the growth of the the executive coaching industry? And about 80% of companies predicted growth to occur at on our scale. We had a 6-point and a 7-point scale. And external coaches, even slightly more bullish on the future, about 83% predicted it to grow. Companies were asked if you increased or decreased your use of coaching over the past 2 years, and you can see here that majority said increased, 60%, 22% were continuing their current use of coaching, and 18% decrease. When we look to the future and said, what about the next 2 years? You see no companies are predicting a decrease, either increase or stay the same. Let's put a quick asterisk, though. Remember that the only companies that would fill out surveys about coaching are probably doing something in the coaching space. They probably are supporters of coaching, so they're more likely to say they may be expecting to increase their use of coaching. And a company that does absolutely no coaching probably wouldn't have filled out our survey. We also asked all practitioners about different kinds of coaching and how likely might those be in the future. Team coaching, group coaching, internal coaching, leadership development programs plus coaching. And 63% of the raters felt that these trends were likely or highly likely. We will get to our first poll. We have a few polls to keep everyone engaged with us, Terry. And I don't know if you started or if I do, but I'd like to ask people here to guess, because we're going to look at a bunch of trends in coaching. We had 14, actually, that we asked people to fill out. And we're curious, what do you think came in first? And what do you think, for fun, came in last? So here's some choices. Internal coaching, leader as coach training, coaching for millennial leaders, whether certification might be mandatory, team coaching, artificial intelligence, replacing human coaches, and adding coaching to existing leadership development programs. So we've got all kinds of votes, and I can see the votes happening here. What do you think came in first place? Most likely trend. And these are from organizations, by the way, not necessarily from coaches, but organizations who manage coaching. I have a few screens, so I'll keep an eye on the polling over here. It looks like we're getting lots of leader as coach training votes. That's probably, that's our number one. Team coaching, number two.
Shall we go ahead and end the poll?
Yeah, okay.
And we will share results.
There we go. Team coaching. All right, I'll show you, of course, our results in just a moment. But team coaching comes in first, followed by leader as coach training. And those are kind of probably your bigger ones, maybe millennial leaders coaching. Now for fun, let's see if you can guess the lowest. Everyone always guesses this, but let's just try it anyways. So Terry, that's the next survey. There you go. What's least likely to be found? Yeah, this is, well, we're getting some votes for the certification thing, but AI is quickly picking up steam as expected. Good, you can go ahead and close the poll. So really, our AI with 80% of the votes, a little bit there on certification. Let's show you what we found, and you can stop sharing that, Terry, and I'll move on to what we found. The number one choice, sorry, let's go backwards. the last choice, the 14th trend, you all guessed properly, which is AI replacing human coaches. Coaching for millennial leaders is going to come in 10th place. Kind of crazy. But I'll have a little explanation on that one in a little bit. Internal coaching, 8th place. Certification, 6th place. Team coaching, 5th. So this group didn't, the group who filled out our surveys had team coaching at 5th compared to the group that we're with here today, but there's plenty of explanations for that. Leader as Coach training comes in 2, and leadership development programs, adding coaching onto them, surprisingly, in our survey, comes in number 1. Terry, did my screen stop sharing? No, okay, it's on. So let's take a look at these. It's kind of an eye chart here, but I'm gonna dig in just a little bit more onto some of these trends, give you a little bit more context of them. So again, these are the practice managers at the companies filling these out on what they predict the future trends could be. And I want to make note of this marker here at about 50%. All of these various trends we were looking at scored above 50% on our scale, using a 6 and a 7 on the 7-point scale, with AI being the only one that didn't. And I will again dig into some of these trends and give you some more commentary. The different groups who fill out our surveys had pretty similar views, more or less, on these trends. So everyone picked that first one, leadership development programs, as number 1. More or less, many of them would pick, leader as coach training as number 2. In a couple of cases, they're number 4 as well. Team coaching certainly does make an appearance, depends who you ask. And I would say if we conducted the survey today, team coaching might come in higher than it did. And by the way, we're repeating the survey soon, and you can have a chance to fill it out if you'd like. I'll give you details at the end of our presentation. I think team coaching might increase. More external executive coaching, we expect that as well from everyone. Of course, the internals pick internal coaching as a likely trend up ahead in the future. And certainly a shout out for coaching specifically aimed at millennial leaders as well, from 2 of the 3 groups. So here's the same list. I just have it looking a little bit differently for you. The top 7 here, and then the next batch here. Again, you can download this and read it at your leisure, since we are moving rather quickly through this. I want to talk about the top 2 right now. I will tell you, I was surprised to see these. I was surprised to see these because we've been doing both of these. We as an industry have been doing both of these forever. Adding coaching onto leadership development programs, that was some of the first ways we did coaching in my days with Marshall Goldsmith. Leader as coach training, perhaps one of the first types of training we'd ever done. I remember doing some of this in the late 90s and on into the early 2000s. So these have been well-known parts of our field for a long time. And I just didn't expect them to come in number 1 and number 2 from the organizations, honestly. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just rather surprised me. And I would say, if I think of some of the clients we serve today, we still do get plenty of requests for both of these. Let me point out another interesting trend, which actually, in my view, is a bit of a combination of several of them. So that's trends number 4, number 9, and number 13. So this has to do with organizations streamlining or centralizing executive coaching. This has to do with coaching management systems or software to oversee coaching, and even to some extent with the decrease in fees that we think we're starting to experience in the field. Organizations are struggling sort of as a victim of our own success as a field. Coaching has gotten so popular that organizations are finding it a burden to oversee coaching. The management of coaching is becoming quite difficult for some organizations. And so we're starting to see a trend where organizations are saying, okay, we need to simplify coaching and maybe let's get it down to one vendor or two or three vendors who are going to oversee all of the coaching that's taking place here. And to go along with that would be coaching management systems. Those are used to software basically to track coaching. Many organizations are dying using crazy Excel spreadsheets to keep track of coaching, but there are software systems out there now to make that much easier. And similarly, when you consolidate and streamline under fewer vendors, some organizations are taking an opportunity to take a look at the fees, perhaps get those fees down a bit, maybe get some bulk rate discounts. I know coaches may not like that, may not be thrilled about that, but especially with lower cost app-based coaching providers that are coming out these days, they do have lower price points than what executive coaches might charge, and that could be teaching the market a little bit that fees can come down. So something to be aware of for all of you, especially if you're an external executive coach. A few of our trends, and then I'll take some questions, Terry, but I'll just finish off this trend section. Team coaching, number 5. Definitely, as I said, I think there's a lot of buzz today around team coaching. And if we did our survey now, I would expect that to have even more buzz than it did in this survey. Group coaching, an alternative form of coaching, which I'm sure maybe you do as part of your teaching methods at Fielding. We're not seeing a lot of it yet at CoachSource, but we think that's going to be a new trend, and we have a practice area for it as well. And internal coaching, always been fairly strong of a practice. Some companies are really into it and use only internals. Some do a blend of the two. Some do not believe in internal coaching whatsoever. But you are definitely seeing an increase in the use of internal coaches. Certification fell to number 6. I speak at a lot of ICF events and talk about how in our research and other parts of our research, we're finding greater requests for accredited certified coaches. 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, as an executive coaching provider, that was not at all the case. Now, I wouldn't say a majority of companies are asking for certification, but I will say, a handful, and that's increasing. So it's definitely, if anyone is listening is trying to decide if they want to go through an ICF process or whatnot, I would say it's probably a good idea, and more organizations are starting to focus on that. So I could talk about plenty more trends, but I think I've gone for a little while here, Terry, and we can pause just briefly for a question or two, and then I can take people on to some of the other pieces of the research that we were going to share. And there may be some in the question panel too, in the chat box. For that.
Yeah, there is. So we have one for you, Brian. It says, what are your predictions on the near term, current to next 18 months, demand for executive coaching, and the biggest shifts from the data you're sharing now because of COVID-19?
Crazy. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I have a perfected answer yet on that. So I felt like the industry was in a great place just before this started and was really booming. I was showing you conferences, and there was like some record number of conferences I felt last year in 19 going on in our field. But having said that, the world has changed and changing quickly. Part of me says, well, if we move through this relatively quickly and get our economies up and moving again, perhaps we can refer back to some amount of normalcy. But we have to also accept that there's great damage to these economies with recession either starting or likely to start soon. And then what does that mean for our field? I can refer back to 2008 recession. We did slow down as a company, but not by a lot. And my optimistic side is saying that there's still going to be a focus on development of leaders. And leaders could be asked to do a lot more with a lot less. So key leaders could still benefit greatly from coaching. And I mentioned at the outset some of the ways coaching can help leaders, especially once we move through this time. I've also noticed, we're watching this very closely at CoachSource. We're not having major slowdowns, surprisingly, and this may still happen, but we're not yet. The coaches input hours as they work for us. And the total number of hours they've input the last few weeks compared to prior weeks is actually roughly the same. Now, new assignments haven't been starting quite as readily as they did before. But those assignments that have already started, I'm not seeing a whole lot of slowdown in yet. I do know from the two people, I only coach about 2-3 people at a time. Neither of them are stopping our assignments. And it certainly gives us, as a coach, it gives them a time to have some downtime with me, to talk through what they're contending with. So I know I didn't give the perfect answer. Kind of hedged my bets a little bit about our future, but I'm still in quite an optimistic mood, and I'm hopeful that we'll start to see a ramp up of our industry. And I see it here in the notes. Mate, our friend Mate, says she's just started a couple new assignments just now. So be interested. I'm sure you all continue syncing up with each other. I would recommend coaches to continue to do that and compare notes. Most coaches I talk to are generally still proceeding on. Not as good if you're a public speaker for live sessions, that is. Terry, we have a request about getting the slides. I'm sure we can make that happen. You and I can work that out.
Great. And by the way, everyone, we'll post that on the Basecamp for the coaching community of practice. And at the end, I'll let you know how to join and post that in the chat room as well for the link.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's talk about why are people hiring a coach? Terry, we have another survey for this one. You get a chance to vote yourself and figure out, why do you think people are hiring coaches at the time in which we ran our survey? Here's a couple choices. Maybe you have a leader in transition who needs coaching help, or someone who has to improve their executive presence. Perhaps it's overall just development of them as a leader. Maybe they're a troubled child, a performance issue that needs to improve. And if you have a poll up, Terry, let's go ahead and run that one.
Yep, it should be running.
Okay.
But no one is currently voting.
Yeah, I don't see it on my screen, so it may not be up in the right place.
Try.
There it goes. I got it now.
Okay. I'm restarting the poll now. So if you could please click on your answer.
It's fun to watch these. Okay, we can close in just a few more seconds. We have a very smart group here, for leadership development, and indeed that's what we're about to see, not a surprise. Everything else just had a couple of votes here, transition, etc. So let me show you what we found. This is from the practice managers, people running coaching in their various organizations, and of course leadership development. They got to choose several choices, by the way. So leadership development being the top one by far and away, and then you have about half saying that they use coaching for transitions, 45% for executive performance presence, and about a quarter for fixing performance problems. Interestingly enough, executive presence was actually higher when we ran our survey in 2012. It was actually those two had flipped, transition and executive presence. So they've swapped a bit where transition coaching is higher, executive presence is a bit lower. Also, fixing performance problems, well worth noting that every time we've run the survey, this decreases over time and now down to about a quarter. I think last time we did it, it was about a third. So we still get some of those problem children that need to get fixed through coaching. We're not getting as many of those. I can certainly say when I intake new requests here at CoachSource, I don't get quite as many of those. Someone's in really big trouble and they must be fixed right away or anything like that. You would likely notice when you look at this slide that leadership development certainly could include some of these others. And leadership development's more of a catch-all, and you are correct in saying that. But nonetheless, sometimes it's interesting to see some of these other breakout varieties, the kind of main reasons for why coaching would be used. Another question we ask that's always a lot of fun, and in fact, I do an entire webinar only on this topic, which is what do executives want when they are looking for a coach? So what are the criteria? And I'm about to share with you, about 12 or so criteria that executives say that they would want when they hire a coach. And Terry, we actually have another poll here that folks might enjoy taking. If you look at these 4 choices that I'm giving you to try and figure out what might have been the top choice from those 100 or so executives when we said, hey, rate some of what you would want in a coach. And what would they say? So Terry, that's a poll in there. Experience in our industry.
Can you guys see it? It says it's running. You don't see it?
Yet. I don't
All right,
yet.
Let me relaunch.
Now I do. Yeah, I do now.
It looks like it's a little slow today.
Yeah.
I've relaunched the poll. So if everyone could go ahead and vote.
What do you think executives want? Experience in the industry, cost, ability to build rapport, or business experience on the part of the coach? And let's give you a little bit of time here to vote. Oh, getting kind of some even answers. This is pretty good. Pretty good. Okay, why don't we close it down in a couple seconds here. All right. So, business experience with 15 votes. Experience in the industry of the executive with 11 votes, and 9 picked ability to build rapport. This is always a lot of fun to take a look at some of these results from the executives. Again, a little bit of an eye chart, but I'll go through some of this with you. Ability to build rapport, it comes in first. And again, they can pick multiple choices in terms of what they wanted. 97% of executives have picked that. Not a surprise, and thankfully coaches are usually quite good at this in most cases. I think that chemistry has been attributed or has been noted in research as being an important factor for change on behalf of the executive, from what I've seen. And so I think we can feel good about that one coming in first place. And number 2 is experience and skills as a coach. So that's basically how good are you as a coach? It could be, and that can include many things. It could be how long you've been coaching, maybe how you got training. It could even include a certification, although that has its own category down below. But it's basically, are you a good coach that could help me improve? Number 3 is business experience. And this is a very interesting one because executives are constantly asking for coaches who have some pretty heavy business experience. I wrote a blog post that jokingly said, I want a coach who has done my job before, but even on a bigger scale than I'm currently doing it. And that can get really difficult for us to find a coach that has, developed a product and taken a company public and going through rounds of funding and is looking for what their next product will be or something crazy. You don't always have coaches that have that type of background, but yet executives seem to ask for that. And so number 2 and number 3, experience as a coach and business experience, are, I think, perhaps 2 very important levers when we're looking for coaches, because we're trying to get as much business experience as we can, but we also need to know the person is a good coach and has had proper, coach training. Because I've seen executives that might come out with of a company and have a big name, but they have no training, and probably what they're mostly doing might even be advising or consulting. And then there's coaches, and I would be in this category, who've mostly come from, say, HR, psychology type backgrounds, coach training, and maybe we've coached for a really long time, but maybe we haven't necessarily run major organization at the C-suite level or anything like that. So it's always an interesting one. We're trying to get as much of both as we can. And also, meanwhile, contending with how do we calm executives down a bit with this demand to have as much business experience as absolutely possible. That does not necessarily make for a good coach.
Hey, Brian, we're stuck on what do execs want in a coach. So I don't know. You may have to stop sharing and reshare.
Is it my green slide?
It's the green slide. Is that the one?
Okay. I'm speaking to that one now.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So someone was asking about the percentage breakdowns. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is it showing percentages or no?
It is not.
Okay, hold on. Let's try that again. Thank you.
Sometimes you may have to stop sharing completely and then reshare. Now it's showing. Now we see the percentages. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I was talking about rapport being number 1. And then I talked about your experience as a coach. And then I just talked about business experience. So I covered those first 3. And then I'll talk about this next one at 84% is coaches who have experience. And actually these 2 are kind of related, honestly. It's an area of specialty. Coaches who have expertise in a certain area that executive is hoping to improve upon. And so I have advised coaches to really specialize and even have a bit of a niche of what is it that you are really, really good at coaching to? What are you really unique at? And that actually could bring some of your past experience into that niche, so that it's much easier for us to hand your bio to the client and say, oh, you're looking to improve your communication skills, or here's a great example. You're transitioning from one role to another, and that's where you're looking to work. And here's some coaches that work mostly always in transition, executive transition. I have one coach who wrote a book on females transitioning roles. And she has a book on this topic. If I was in my office, I'd show it to you behind me. And when I get a request like that, I think of her right away and say, you know what, this is a coach you might want to talk to, because this is exactly what she does for a living. She literally wrote the book on this topic, and here's her book. So I always advising coaches to have a real good specialty area that you write about, that you speak about, that you're known for, and is really easy then for executives to want to take a look at you as a coach.
Hey, Brian, we had a question related to this. How do you typically respond to the demand that firsthand experience in coaching for people who want that?
So good. So when they ask for firsthand experience, and I'm assuming we're talking business experience.
Yeah, business experience.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So sometimes the experience they're asking for is doable by us in terms of who I know in our network. So they might say, do you have a former CFO? And I do know some former CFOs who are good coaches that I might be able to introduce. But sometimes it's a lot harder than that. And I gave a bit of a joke a moment ago about someone who developed a product and then raised money and then took their company public, and now they want to develop their next product. And it's the founder of that company, and they wanted a coach who's done all of those things. And I don't think anyone on this call has. I haven't met a coach that has done all of those things, but in those cases, what we try and do is roll them back a bit on, first of all, we might need to take another look on what is it that you're asking for. Are you really looking for coaching in the way that we all seem to define it? Are you maybe looking for a mentor, advisor, or consultant? Maybe that's what you're looking for. Another idea, is to help point out that, someone who's done all of those things you're asking for may not necessarily be a good coach. They don't necessarily, coaches don't necessarily come from that kind of background all the time. And a great technique I heard from David Peterson of Google, he has this happen to him a lot inside Google. And he'll tell the executive, okay, who here in Google has done all of these things you're asking for? And the executive will point to, this person and that person. And then he'll follow it up by saying, would you want that person to be your coach? And they always say, oh, no, never. I wouldn't want that. And that's a quick way to help them understand that, maybe having all of that business experience is not necessarily what you need for what it is that you're trying to do. It's a great question, for sure. So you can see some of the other specialties here, some of the other, desires that executives have. Funny joke. You see cost is kind of down here, about 65%. Cost is not that as important to the executives as other things are. When someone was in one of my presentations and saw this here and then saw the one about building rapport way up here and then said, this tells me I need to smile more often and then I can charge more. So take that for, for what it's worth. Location, where you are located is way down here, but I will say that companies usually call me and say, do you have a coach in St. Louis? And that's how they start, is based on location. So location, I think, is actually more important than perhaps it's showing here. And you see things like certification and advanced degree, and many of us have one or both of these. And I still think you generally need these as a coach, and maybe executives don't think it's as critical, but I think there's certain things that you sort of just have to have. And obviously they really want rapport building and other things, but you still have to have these other pieces as part of being an effective coach as well. So Terry, we are at the top of our hour, and you tell me how we want to do this, because we can start to wrap up, or I can show a few more slides on a couple of the other things we had promised when we had.
Yeah, why don't we continue on, and if anyone needs to drop off, feel free to do that, of course. And this is being recorded, so you can always pick it up later if you have another commitment. But Brian, if you wouldn't mind, I would say continue on.
Okay, great. I had promised in our write-up that we were going to talk about return on investment and even what coaches charge, which I bet most people want to hear. So those are my next two topics, and then we'll wrap up. So it won't be too much longer. All right, so let's look at impact measurements of coaching. Now, this is another eye chart, but I'll take active coaching. And the reds are basically kind of your top choices. So from leaders, well, let me do the organization level right here. Organization. And then the number drops down quickly.
We lost you just for a moment, Brian, if you wouldn't mind repeating the last 15 seconds.
Yeah, and then we drop down quickly to the next choice, which is 53% of organizations say, well, we asked the boss of the person who was coached whether or not coaching was effective. And then all the other choices fall off a fair amount. Those of you who know CoachSource and Marshall Goldsmith know that we really like a method called a mini survey. It's a very short survey that goes around to those working with the leader who was coached at the end of the assignment to see whether or not they've noticed improvement. And we think that's a great idea, but it isn't widely used. 39% of organizations are picking that. Maybe the leader gets promoted as a result of coaching, and that's a way to measure impact. We have 29%. Could we look at the business impact of coaching? I'll have a slide on that in a moment. And then repeating a 360 or doing no measurement whatsoever. I will say organizations are doing more measurement than they used to in coaching, but they're still not doing enough. And there's a lot that can be done. And I do a whole webinar just on that topic, and there's others that have as well, that I think as a field, we really have to continue to increase our use of measurements to validate the work that we're doing. You can compare to some of the other groups here about how they measure the impacts, and then the top two in each group are in red. So executives who experienced coaching said 75% of them experienced being asked whether they thought they had improved, and not much else, as you can see by looking at this list, really scored particularly highly from the executives. Internal and external coaches also share the belief that asking the leader what they thought, whether they improved, would be a top choice. But again, these numbers are not that high when you really look at them. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, that's being missed here.
And Brian, there's a quick question about this. One person was wondering about using employee engagement surveys as a measure for leader effectiveness.
Yeah, I love that question. I just saw it here. And I'm starting to see more measurement of employee engagement surveys for effectiveness than I have in the past. And we didn't even ask this question when we ran the survey in 2018. And we probably will ask it again when we get to this again in the future. But I have seen interesting studies that I don't believe any have been published yet, but I saw one company who taught managers coaching skills, and then they looked at engagement results for those around that manager compared to similar managers who did not go through the coaching skills training. And they were finding significantly better engagement survey scores. And they were saying that they were able to control for a variety of factors. So, I hope that some of this research will come to the forefront and be published for our field up ahead, because I think it would be great to learn about that connection, because a lot of companies use engagement surveys at this point. So I think it could be a really great way to look at the impact that coaching can have. The holy grail in our field is this return on investment, right? ROI. And we look at ROI a lot. It's hard to measure, and there are methodologies. There are people who specialize in it. And so when one of our clients really wants an ROI metric, I refer them to one of my colleagues that I know who can do this work. In this graphic, what it's basically saying to you, I was comparing 2005 to 12 to 2018 when we asked companies whether or not they link coaching to business results. And from 2005 to 12, there actually was a jump. Now, we changed our scale a little bit. But generally about 51% of companies saying that they regularly or occasionally link coaching to business results. But here in 2018, that number actually fell from what we had at 51% to actually 32%. And more companies now would like to do so. In these conferences I go to, one of the top questions that is always posed is, how do you measure ROI? That's what we're concerned with. So definitely always desired for our field, but hard to measure. And the current methodologies out there, I think if you used them for your dissertation research, your professors wouldn't accept the methodology for dissertation purposes, because they would say there's too many confounding factors. But that's dissertation research. So organizations who really still need to measure this, there are ways it can be done. And sometimes it just satisfies them that at least they're getting some impact. As a joke, by the way, any ROI study I've ever seen always shows about a 600% return on investment for coaching. I don't know why, but sometimes it's 666%, kind of odd. But anyways, I see a question about app-based coaching. And there, Jeremy's asking, are you talking about BetterUp? And for app-based coaching, and you saw it on my trends slide a little bit ago, app-based coaching definitely on the increase, and I think it will rise in the next time we run our study. And BetterUp is the big one in that space. They've raised $100-something million to do it. Pros and cons, probably could get into that some other time, but to doing that. But definitely there's a whole rash of new providers that are providing coaching over apps, and sometimes doing so at fairly low rates. All right, the last bit I have, and then I can take some more questions, is the fun part about money, right? Because we all want to know, what do you charge? What are they charging? So I can compare notes here. So from our research, pretty crazy ranges. Now, this is what companies told us they were paying for coaching. And we basically asked by the hour, if you can kind of do it by hour. And we asked, what about your 6-month assignments? But if you can see the average, okay, it's $500 an hour by the hour. But the standard deviation being at 225, the range at 250 to 1100, enormous range. And I find this true with all the coaches we use. We can have some incredible ranges in pricing from coaches. And so companies are certainly indicating that. So pretty wide range in differences in what they're paying. And then when they tell us the 6-month assignment, you can see enormous differences. Look at this range, 400 on the low to 35,000 on the high. And of course, you know, companies may be, obviously a 6-month assignment can look different. So this answers one of the questions here from Silva, is how many hourly sessions in a 6-month? Well, that can look very different by client. We do a 6-month, roughly 40 hours is included in a 6-month assignment, and then we price it accordingly. But I see 6-month designs that are anywhere from just a few hours virtual to 12 hours, 20 hours, all the way up to 40 and beyond. So I think that's part of the problem with the question, is that you just have great variances in what a 6-month assignment might look like. We asked coaches, what do you typically charge? So what you're seeing now is what companies said. Now I'm going to show you what coaches said. And there is a discrepancy here. Interestingly, coaches have their hourly rate is actually lower than the average company pay at about $388. Now, a few answers to why that is. You know, we're not always getting the coach and the company matched up. So you could very likely have companies answering this and they're not referring to the coaches who are answering this. So that could be one answer. And another one too is, you know, there can be, for companies, they have a big management piece of overseeing coaching taking place. And so it's possible they could be paying a vendor, like a company like ours, a certain rate, which includes all the management and contracting and all of that stuff. And then, of course, the coaches earn a lower percentage than that. So that could possibly explain that. But again, you see enormous differences again. When you look at the 6-month, or even we tried to look at the 1 year for fun, you can see the differences are just, again, absolutely enormous. It's very hard to capture fees sometimes. Hourly rate might be the best way to do it, only because it's the smallest denominator you can get to, that at least you can compare apples and oranges. And on top of all of this, the rates change in other parts of the world. Our survey was 70% North America respondents, but around the world, the rates change. And at CoachSource, we do a lot of research on that, because Europe tends to be a certain percent higher than the States, and then certain parts of Asia are even higher. Places like Japan and Australia are, among Singapore, among the most expensive in the world for coaching. I even discovered that Dubai in UAE earlier this year is actually a lot more expensive than I thought for coaches. So you can see some pretty incredible ranges sometimes. But hopefully, at least some of this data can give you a little bit more of a sense of what some of the rates are for coaching, executive coaching.
Hey,
And
Brian.
as I mentioned earlier, I think these rates could be decreasing a bit. Yes, Terry.
Yeah, so are you interested in sharing the poll or doing a poll from the
Did I
group?
have one?
Yep, we do have one
Hey,
more.
yeah. I forgot about that. But yeah, we have a fun poll. Let's turn that on. So we're asking you what you charge. By the way, we won't know who said what, right? We couldn't figure out who was vandalizing our thing. So we definitely aren't going to know who's saying this here. But you might enjoy hearing from each other. I've given you some ranges on what you typically charge, or if you're a company who hires coaches, you would actually answer it more about like, what are you normally paying? And this could be kind of intriguing to see. Hopefully you'd be willing to participate.
And we're seeing pretty good participation here.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you do see a range again. For sure. We got about 75% of the folks have now voted. So I guess we can probably wrap it up. There we go. So you can see it right there on the screen, hopefully, with majority at our sort of at that 200 to 300 range. And then you've got a kind of 5 below it and 5 above it, but then 5 above that at the 4 to 500. And you definitely do still see a range here within the room, but hopefully it gives you a sense of what some of the colleagues here might be charging. Again, as I was saying, Terry, before you mentioned this, that I think fees are actually decreasing. Again, I find some more pressure from our clients to get the fees down. Not massively, but there's sort of a light pressure, I suppose, to shave off 20% or something from what we might have seen a while ago. And I don't know if that's because there's lots of coaches out there. I don't actually think that's necessarily the case. But I guess, could it be the app-based providers that are training clients that you can get coaching for $100 an hour or something? I don't totally know. Is it a buyer's market for clients being asked in here? I don't know about that. I will say, yes and no. At the very top of the house, that's not at all the case. Some of these C-suite coaches are ridiculously busy, often full, and charge whatever they want. And often it could be $100,000 for a 6-month assignment if you can even hire them. And that's often what we see at the very top of the house. And so clients have to just, accept whatever it is the coach at that level is charging.
And Brian, I'm curious about that. What would you say the percentage of your CoachSource client coaches are at that level? I mean, is it 5% or 2%?
Yeah, 2% or something. The vast majority of assignments we see tend to be director and vice president level, which actually matches some of this research I'm sharing with you, where we found similar that most coaching tends to happen at those 2 levels, with a little bit of coaching above it and a little bit of coaching below it. Executives at the very top don't hire coaches as often, or if they do, we don't know about it, as those at the VP level. Although they're usually more willing to be supportive of coaching taking place, but they don't as often have a coach for themselves. But it's still a bit of a minority in terms of the number of assignments that are at the very top at some of these price points. Having said that, I will mention that I'm starting to notice more requests at the very top of the house as well, more than we've seen. Last year was kind of a record for the amount of times we've seen that. So perhaps that could be another encouraging trend for the industry. Now, as we move to close and accept questions, I just wanted to also point out, and we can close out our poll. The last thing just to say is that the research we're engaged in here We're actually going to repeat a kind of a pulse survey or a trends only survey of the research. So some of the highlights you just saw actually will get repeated here in 20. And so that's up ahead, 2020 trends. And if if we connect with each other somehow, some way, or if you watch our social media or join our newsletter, whatever it is, you can be made aware once this comes out. And of course, you'll get a copy of it once available as well. And I'm sure I'll do more presentations. So if you want to have a chance to speak into what are some trends you're seeing in the field, and everything from what are you charging and what do executives want? Not everything we're asking again, but some of them we are. Please let's stay in touch somehow so we can make sure in about a month or more, we're trying to time this, but we'll be starting to send out our links for those who'd like to participate in the research. So we'd love to have you have your input on that. And Terry, I think that gets us to about a great spot for additional questions. If you wanted to, I don't know how you do this, if you unmute or turn on cameras or whatever it is, but I'm happy to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a couple more in the chat room we can start with. One is about using coaching portals to track progress.
So let's see, I see that here, coaching portals. And I don't know if I understand it. I will say that, and so maybe David can clarify a bit. If I understand, coaching portals could maybe be referring to coach management systems, which is what we use to track progress. Basically, our coaches all have a login, and on any assignment they're doing, they constantly update us on where they are with each leader, how many hours have they used, how far along in the assignment. And something they can even tell us what's the really, really high level area that the leader is working on.
And David, you're unmuted if you'd like to elaborate on your question.
Yeah, I was actually referring, Brian, not so much to a software if you're coaching a number of different people at one company, but like I use something, there's a number of them out there. I use something called the Coaches Console. So all of my clients I create a private website. It's not my external coaching website that they might find on Google. But once they become a client, they've got a log-on ID and a password. It's basically an internal private website. Their goals are there. They can schedule all of their appointments with me, change. I have resources for them. If they take a 360 assessment, something like the Leadership Circle profile, they can log in. All that stuff is there, books that I might recommend for our coaching engagement. Anyway, that's how I use, and some people use like a private client portal.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard of that one and a couple others now that you're refreshing me on it. And I'm not as familiar because I haven't used those. And I know when I go to these coaching conferences, I seem to see more out there advertising and so on. So it sounds like they're gaining popularity. Some of what you described, our own system does, but what we don't do is have a way for a client to log in and set up shop with us and schedule, at least in our system at the moment. But the app-based, maybe somewhat related is these app-based approaches are getting very popular, and a lot of companies love the idea that their leaders could log in, set up time with the coach, and usually there's resources there as well. The action plan can sometimes be done there as well. So I think most definitely we're going to naturally see even more use of tech to support our work. And sounds like a great way to keep yourself organized as well.
So Tim, I see you have your video on. Do you have a question?
Thinking. Come back.
Okay, great. Asma, I see you also had a question. Would you like to ask it?
Yeah. So with this app-based coaching that is coming up and increasingly gaining traction, technology platforms increasingly gaining traction, coaching is actually being seen as a solution to coach at all levels of the organization. There's an increase in the manager and IC levels as well. So do you see a change in strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an encouraging trend in one sense because it's expanding our field beyond just executives. There's a lot of talk about democratization of coaching and what a lot of these app companies are striving to do. One thing I struggle with a little bit is, okay, so you could do coaching all virtually, which we always have been able to do that. But in the end, you still have even if the app is around, you still have one human coaching a human. And so you still have labor, if you will. You still have a coach. You have an educated, trained coach doing their job. And I don't know how much you can continue to get the price down unless the providers, the coaches, are willing to accept coaching at low prices. So there's only so much the tech can really help you do to save cost, in my view. And so until or unless these providers move more towards an artificial intelligence approach to coaching, which would be a whole conversation in and of itself, you're still going to have a coach, a human coach that's doing the work and should be paid a fair amount for that. But having said that, it is raising the awareness of coaching. And if you look at how much money BetterUp has raised and the noise they make out in the industry, it's probably helpful for the entire industry for raising the awareness of coaching as an intervention.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Brian, we're probably about at time. Any closing remarks that you might have that you might, any advice around coaching trends where executive coaches should be prepared for the next year?
Well, I think I'd like to close by saying that I care greatly about this industry, obviously. And I do sessions like this a lot because, so I like to joke that when I'm on an airplane and someone asks me what I do, I'd like to be able to say I'm a coach or an executive coach, and they know what that means right away. And I don't want to have to give 4 more sentences to explain what we do for a living. And what I say that to say that I want our profession to keep raising the game through many different ways, but to keep raising the game, raising the bar so that we have been a fledgling industry, but do we want to become a true profession that people know and respect, just like other professions that we all know and respect and understand what they do? That's where I want us to go. And we have to keep raising our game in so many ways, in terms of how good we are as coaches and how we present ourselves, how we measure results and so forth. And so my, hope for today is that a session like this helps all of us to continue raising our game and what we provide and offer to clients. And I think we're now at a very critical moment in history where we can really show the world what we can do. And I really hope that that's what we can all move towards from a session like this. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me. Thanks for being here. Please contact me as mentioned, and God bless you all. Be safe too.
Thank you, Dr. Underhill. And it's been a pleasure to have you today. And thanks for your patience with our earlier technical challenges. That was a new learning for all of us on April Fool's Day, but we were able to pull it all together. So thank you for your willingness and flexibility. And thank you for being here. This has been a great experience to hear about your research and what we have to look forward to. I do just have a couple of quick announcements that I'd like to share with everyone. If you are not yet familiar with Fielding's programs, you can go to coach.fielding.edu. This is our main website for comprehensive evidence-based coaching. All of our webinars, like the one today, are posted on our Thought Leaders series videos, and that's where Brian's will be posted either later this week or early next week. And then we have professional series videos, which are more about using coaching in practice. And we have a blog. Our blog lists up-and-coming webinars. So if you're looking for what's next, you can come here to watch past webinars, but also see what we're up to in the near future. Our next big webinar is coming up on April 18th which is around LinkedIn 2020, what you need to know for your brand, business, and network. That is an EBC Professional Series webinar. So come and learn about how you can leverage LinkedIn to build your business. We'll also be talking on May 13th on coaching clients and non-financial adjustments in the retirement transition. So if any of you are interested in retirement yourself, or maybe coaching others in retirement, which is certainly a big topic with baby boomers retiring record numbers right now, join in on May 13th for that special Thought Leaders webinar. One of our alums will be sharing her dissertation research in this space. So it's hard research with some great evidence that you can apply in your own practice. On May 18th, we're having a very special webinar, which is the launch of Fielding's monograph. We have now and have in press a new book called Innovations in Leadership Coaching, Research and Practice. And you can read Francine Campone's blog about it. And then we'll be doing a panel discussion with myself, Francine, Kathy Norwood, and Eric Ostrowski. We are the editors of the book. We have 19 chapters in this book with 27 authors. So we'll be talking about what's coming up and trends in coaching in research and practice. So look out for that. And then the book will be launching in June or early July. So stay tuned for more information about that. So again, thank you all for coming tonight. And we look forward to having you on one of our future webinars. And stay in touch with us by joining our coaching community of practice, which is free of charge to anyone in the world who's interested in coaching. You can join at ccop.fielding.edu. That's ccop.fielding.edu. We look forward to having you. And thanks again, Brian. It's great to see you. And it was great having you on tonight. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.